So what we're going to do is we're going to move along to this co-main event of the evening. Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira taking on Michael Chandler. And we'll briefly stop our screen share just to point out the gloves in the back. Shout out to my beautiful and wonderful lady for those gloves. Those were Charles Oliveira fight-worn UFC gloves signed by the champ. The champion has a name, Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira. But here's the thing, guys. The last time these two fought, I had Michael Chandler on the money line. I had Michael Chandler, round 1 knockout. Did y'all watch that fight? We almost had it, right? And that's why I always say I don't bet based on my favorites. I try and bet based on logic, based on reason. And I was wrong that time, right? I obviously didn't get the right answer, the right outcome. But the theory behind the bet I thought was pretty sound, which was a guy like Michael Chandler, very difficult to submit. He ends up getting submitted by Dustin Poirier, which is a divine comedy. But when you look at that fight, he blew it. Right? Like there's no other way to describe it. He blew it. He had a lot of opportunities against Dustin. He took his back. He was in great spots. He hurt him a couple times or at least landed big shots. You saw that a guy like Chandler, in basically every fight that he's ever had, and especially so at the UFC level, he lands impactful shots. He hurts guys. He rocks them. He gets them off balance. He picks them up, turns them sideways, slams them on their head. He's very physically strong. He's very athletic, and he's got an ability to kill switch guys, right? Dan Hooker on a career run right now, a career resurgence. He got absolutely flatlined by Michael Chandler, and I was surprised, right? I thought that, I was like, man, Dan Hooker, big guy, long body. He's going to be able to throw these knees, teeps up the middle, kind of keep Chandler honest. And the explosion, the intensity, everything that Michael Chandler brought to that fight, he's never let him get off the starting blocks. He chased him down and killed him. And I think that he had a lot of the right ideas against Charles, and then he got inside his own head. He got too tired too quick, and he blew it. And when you think about the way, I want to just say shout out to Azure. You are like family, Liam. I feel blessed. Just 3.5 years as an MMA fan, I have the privilege to learn from you. You're far too kind. Thank you so much for being here. Your family too. Appreciate you very much, Azure. Appreciate the kind words. We're always here to try and help out, and we're learning together in real time. And with that being said, back to this fight, guys. Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler. What do I see here? I want to bring up something that I made the last time these guys fought. Okay, so I'm going to share this on the screen. And here we go. Let's see. So we've got the written breakdown. And I'm going to share this. So when I made my line for this fight, I thought that Michael Chandler should be favored at the time that it was booked. And obviously, I was still new to my handicapping career, so you guys can critique my stuff any which way you want. But when you look at it, this is how I had seen it myself, and I had a couple different bets there. I had Michael Chandler on the money line. I had the fight does not start round 4. That was sharp. I had Chandler wins in round 1 at plus 700 and Chandler KO 2 at plus 1100, right? And he ends up getting knocked out in round 2. But here was my thoughts on the matchup at the time. I thought it was a great matchup. And I thought that when you look at a guy like Michael Chandler, patiently waiting for the right opportunity, right? Ironic, because the guy's still been patiently waiting for this opportunity to fight Conor McGregor. And now this is like the ultimate make it or break it fight for Chandler. I said that he's had a lot of close but no cigar moments, right? He's always been the bridesmaid, never the bride in terms of his UFC career. And that happened against Charles as well, right? Charles goes on to be the champion. The champion has a name. He's had all these big fights in the intervening period. And we've seen a lot of, fun, action, crazy fights from Michael Chandler, but we haven't seen a real demonstration of his skills. Because if you look, like, I could just tell you guys, if you go back and watch what we've seen from a guy like Michael Chandler in Bellator, he was a different fighter, right? He would be a little more tactical. When he couldn't finish you early, he'd take people down, he'd hold them down, head in the center of the chest, hold them down, just like grinding style wrestling. And he would look tired while doing it, but he could do it for the 5 rounds if he needed to. And against Charles, what Charles brings to the table, what makes him so dangerous is this guy can simply generate offense from every position, whether you're on the feet, whether you're on the mat, whether he's on top position, whether he's on bottom position. He's extremely dangerous from everywhere. And I think that what happened to Michael Chandler, I thought he would be able to defend the rear naked choke series, right? If you look, Charles Oliveira's best series is the rear naked chokes. He's good at everything, but his best series is it's the highest percentage choke in all of MMA, jiu-jitsu, whatever you want to call it. And when you look at a guy like Michael Chandler, what has been so impressive about his career is several guys have taken his back and he's able to either get a 2-on-1 on the baseball bat grip, pull it over the top, not let them get the choke in and then turn in, or just to use his insane physicality and turn in on body triangles, turn in on what appears to be, locked in holds. And then he's on top of somebody again, facing down on them, and it's hard for them to deal with. And if you look back, he did show the defensive jiu-jitsu that I talked about, but it spent a lot of energy. He was in panic stations. He was in a lot of dangerous positions early. And I think that if Michael Chandler wants to beat Charles Oliveira, it's a pretty straightforward fight that he has to fight. You cannot get into unwarranted grappling exchanges with the guy. You need to try and have a tactical fight with him. He could either go out there and knock him out, which is possible. He showed that in the last fight, right, when he dropped him badly. Or you need to extend him to a decision. You need to bring Charles to a 15-minute decision. Arman Sarukian was closer to being finished than Charles Oliveira when they fought, in my humble opinion, right? Like if you just said who was closer to being finished at any point, it was Arman. But who's got the next title shot? And who's the guy that moved on, survived in advance? It was Arman Sarukian. And you could say Arman did everything right positionally. He got to the right spots. One guy lost their trousers, right? It was Arman Sarukian. He had to get out of his trousers in order to survive a choke. God bless him for it. Right? He wanted to win. He didn't give up easily. And when you're looking at this matchup, a guy like Michael Chandler, over 15 minutes, if he fights a tactical game plan, which I know is asking a lot, right? If you look at his body of work in the UFC, he's done mostly the opposite. But he's done a lot of interviews this week where he talked about, hey, guys, I know that I have been fighting like an idiot. I've been trying to be a fan favorite. I've been trying to get everybody, off their feet and go out there and do the damn thing and, take big risks and throw big shots and get into these fights. I think in this fight, he's understanding what is on the other side of this for his career. If he wins, it's big fights. It's great opportunities. If he loses, he's an afterthought in the UFC, right? And that's a big drop-off, right? So for Michael Chandler, this fight is everything. The one thing is, I see some people, my guy Hunter in the chat says Islam versus Charles 2 next year. Does Charles want that fight? Like, I don't know. Charles hasn't seemed like a guy who's been really looking for that fight to me. Oh, this is 5-5, says Decot. Wow. This is 5-5. So I got to double check that to be sure. Wow. Damn. All right. Then that is interesting. And I honestly have to say, I didn't know that, Decot. I thought this was 3 5-minute rounds, but it's a co-main event, 5 5-minute rounds. I think that is a little bit better for Oliveira, right? But granted, right? Let's go back and think about this. We've got a guy in Charles Oliveira. When I talk about motivation, the guy's been a champion. He's been at the very top. What is his desire to get back there? I think that's an open question. Some guys find that will to just push through and do it again. But then look at Israel Adesanya against Duplessis in his last fight. A lot of people had a vision of what Adesanya was in their mind. And that same guy, that guy who refused to lose, that guy who said, I'm willing to die in here, that guy wasn't there on that night, right? It was just, it was Israel Adesanya. It wasn't Izzy. It was just the guy, right? It wasn't the aura. It wasn't any of that. It was just the man on the night. And I think that Charles Oliveira, huge aura fighter, awesome guy, was on the hottest run basically in lightweight history for a little while, right? He's certainly one of them. We go back and look at his record, 34-10 in professional mixed martial arts, incredible record, 22-10 in the UFC. But last couple of fights, Arman Tsarukyan loses a split decision. Tough one, right? I thought that fight could have went his way, honestly. On the night, I thought it could have went his way. And it didn't. Then you look at the Beneil Dariush fight. I mean, sensational, right? A great fight. He was in some trouble early, got taken down, got put in some spots. But ultimately, we just saw Charles had the resolve, got back up, landed the huge head kick, got on top, and Beneil just had nothing for him at that stage. Then you look at Islam Makhachev. Not a very competitive fight. At the time, I dumped a bet online account balance on that. I was like, and again, I got the Charles gloves. I'm a Charles fan. I'm certified Charles fan. I love the guy. But I thought that was a horrible matchup. When you got a guy like Islam, very strong, very technical, doesn't make any mistakes really on the mat. And that is where Charles typically capitalizes on guys that wrestle. Right? Arman gave him more opportunities, certainly, on the mat than a guy like Islam. Islam's just too controlled, too tight, too strong. And then on the feet, he's also very sound, and he was able to land some good shots on Charles. Oh, excuse me. So what do I think? I think in this kind of fight, both these guys deserve a ton of credit and respect, right? They're both getting back in there for a rematch. And what does Charles Oliveira have to gain? This is the question I always ask. You guys have said maybe he gets back in the title opportunity. Maybe. I think he's certainly behind Arman, right? So Arman's going to get the next shot. Maybe he gets another shot after that. Maybe if Arman beats Islam, he gets his rematch with Arman for the title. Like maybe these are some things that we could envision happening. But I also think on the other side, if Michael Chandler is coming off of a loss to Charles Oliveira, he's probably out of the Conor McGregor sweepstakes, right? I think that Conor McGregor typically not looking for, somebody just coming off of a loss. Shout out to Matlock as well. Likes the Ali Frazier poster in the background. We got some cool ones here. Also, what else do we got? We got Cormier Miocic. Cormier Miocic too. Y'all must have forgot about Stipe. Y'all really must have forgot about Stipe. I did not. We got him up on the poster. So shout out to you, man. I think that, full screen the camera. You're a genius. Thank you. Yeah. We got Cormier Miocic on the wall. We got Rousey Carmouche up on the wall. We got Ali Frazier on the wall. We got Ali Liston up behind us as well. So a lot of great stuff. And I'll tell you guys, there's going to be a brand new banner here, right? We got the coffee and jiu-jitsu. Absolutely perfect. But we're going to be figuring out a new configuration because I just got a brand new banner from my guy, Raf. So I'm excited to show you guys that. A lot of great changes coming to the background of the studio, but we're always going to keep the fight stuff. You know that's where we rock first and foremost. So shout out to you guys. Thank you all for the support. And let's give some closing thoughts on this co-main event, okay? So I'll just be honest with you guys. If I favored Michael Chandler to win this fight a few years ago, it's going to be very difficult for me to, not look at it like a dog or pass situation at the current odds. I will also tell you guys that I could be blinded by the fact that I bet it before and I thought we were very close to cashing, right? I think with a different referee, they stopped the fight. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that it was that close. It was within the margins. Charles is tough. Charles gets this reputation as a quitter. Truthfully, he's tough, man. He rallies, he gets back up from being hurt. He does all these really impressive things. I get what you're saying, but I think you're misunderstanding Conor's motivation. Conor would not like to be the guy who cleaned up the sloppy seconds of Charles Oliveira. He would rather fight Charles Oliveira off a win over Michael Chandler than he would Michael Chandler off a loss to Charles Oliveira, guaranteed. One thing about Chandler, he was saying he prepped to 170 and then had to make the change. Weight cut's going to be shit. Obviously, he's a pro, knows what he's doing, but age and going back down. That's a great point and an interesting one. I did actually post maybe a week ago that I thought that Michael Chandler already looked pretty gaunt. He's a big guy to make 155, period. And we know that Charles has literally missed weight for title fights before. So it's like both these guys, I do think could make a mistake on the scale, that type of thing. Maybe it's worth watching the weigh-in for this one. But in any case, we had a fight that played out that I thought looked on the night like a 50-50 fight, right? Where you'd say maybe based on cardio, maybe based on the fact that he's really dangerous as a submission hunter, you'd favor Charles, right? Like maybe I was wrong in my initial cap. Maybe I should have made Charles a 60% favorite, minus 150. But I don't know. I don't know that I agree that Charles should be minus 250 when we've seen him get dropped in many of his fights. We've seen him get grounded and controlled in some of these fights as well. I think that this is an interesting fight. And again, two guys that I like and respect. If I had to say who I like more, Charles Oliveira infinitely, right? Like who would I rather hang out with? Charles Oliveira. I think Mike Chandler's fine. He's some people's cup of tea. I think he's all right. But in terms of just the matchup, again, a few years back, I think if you had booked this fight, it would have been a pick'em. And now you're looking at, one guy who's been on a great run, got a lot of respect, got a lot of big wins, and maybe his motivation isn't the same. And I think that for a guy like Charles, he's got everything. He's got the titles, he's got the recognition, he's got the bonuses, he's got the money. Like, I don't know what he really needs anymore out of the fight game, except that he loves doing it. But he's coming off of, 2 losses in his last 3 fights. He hasn't been aces lately, and he's been fighting the best guys, but I think you could give a lot of the same credit to Chandler. I mean, Chandler went out there and he fought, Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier is a top guy, a guy who was just fighting for the title. He beat Tony Ferguson. What do you really make of that? But he fought very close with Justin Gaethje. And again, he fought like a bonehead, right? Just let that fight slip through his fingers. Gaethje seemed like a fight that he could have won. He hurt Gaethje so bad. He had Gaethje, off in cyberspace for a second. The thing I don't like about Chandler is his negative fight IQ. But the thing I do like about Chandler is the fact that he's talking this week like he's going to try and fight with a tactical, smart game plan. So how much can you believe fighters? Only as far as you could throw them. But I think that this is a fun fight, a worthwhile rematch. And, I'll just say this. There's been a couple of UFC champions like Benson Henderson, that got put in the absolute box by Michael Chandler. So we got to remember Michael Chandler's a spark plug. He's got power in his hands. And don't be too surprised if he's able to put those hands on Charles, because Charles, for as much as I love him, part of his style is an upright striker who walks into the pocket and takes a lot of risks. So